Hello, and welcome to what is going to be a very interesting stream tonight. In case you've been living underneath a rock, Vampire the Masquerade has had some stuff going on this week. We started off with a release of a third-party written system and chronicle that's going to bring some vampires into D&D. We'll get into that in a little bit. And also, the headline story of the day is, of course, the release of the playtest material and announcement for Vampire 6th edition. We're going to take a look at everything that's been released thus far, have a chat about what we know, and discuss what the impact might be for Vampire the Masquerade and the entire family. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. Helps if I pick the right screen. There we go. So, D&D Beyond and Ghostfire Gaming have teamed up together to release Vampire the Masquerade Bound by Blood. So this is not Modern Knights Vampire the Masquerade. It's harking back to Dark Ages. So that's Middle Ages Vampire, if you're not familiar with that. It was a previous edition, sort of around the third edition of Vampire the Masquerade through to the 20th anniversary edition, otherwise known as 4th edition Vampire the Masquerade. So yes, Ghostfire Gaming took a lot of the ideas and mechanics from Vampire the Masquerade and turned them into classes, essentially. We have an entirely new character type with a bunch of subclasses, some new mechanics, some new items, and all brought into a D&D setting specifically released on D&D Beyond. That's right, you can only get this thus far as a digital download. Now, it's fairly reasonably priced if you are looking to play vampires in a D&D setting and really like the lore of Vampire the Masquerade. This package also includes a scenario for level 4 characters. Now, if you're familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, the idea of leveled characters is a little bit jarring, but it kind of works, especially when you're bringing them into a D&D setting. Now, whether or not you believe that this is a good idea, whether you think we should cross the streams is your own opinion. I've had a chance to have a really quick flick through this, and I will say it's really quick. Unfortunately, my day job is impinging on my ability to interact with the amount of TTRPG stuff that I would love to do on a daily basis. And I will say there are some interesting choices. I think they've done okay in bringing Vampire the Masquerade into a D&D setting. Do I think that this is a good thing that Vampire the Masquerade players will really enjoy playing? I don't think so. What I think this is more targeted towards are D&D players who either want to understand what Vampire the Masquerade is all about, but stay within their familiar system of D&D, or DMs who are like, for the love of all that is holy in this world, please can we play another system? It's got some new approaches to Vampire, and it's got some really interesting treatments of disciplines, so those superpowers that vampires have. Now, I know there are already third-party treatments of vampires and dampiers in D&D Beyond. I think that this is thematically a good time for this sort of project to come out. We've had Ravenloft. The Curse of Strahd has become super freaking popular. And yeah, I think from a business perspective, it's a thematically correct time to be bringing Bound by Blood into D&D Beyond. Hello, folks. Sorry, I was on a little bit of a rant. Now, if you are familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, you will not get a full suite of your clans. There are Bruja, Gangrel, La Sombra, Nosferatu, Toreador, and Ventru available. But I do see a point coming where people are familiar enough with the ideas and concepts behind bringing them in as subclasses that we will see the other clans come in either as homebrew or perhaps as additional content, DLC if you will. We have an understanding of how the Beast spurns characters forward in this sort of treatment, and we've also got a new set of backgrounds, feats, and gear specifically for vampires or people hunting those vampires. So we're looking at Kindred adjacent stuff as well with this release. There is also the idea of a an actual mechanic around masquerade level. Now, the writers do say in the introduction to this that the masquerade is not fully formed in the Dark Ages, and that it is very much a burgeoning idea where Kindred have come to understand that people are suspicious and will continue to be suspicious if certain acts by Kindred are performed in front of them. And so this germinating idea of a masquerade is coming to life. So there is a mechanic for a masquerade level, and that is kind of formalized in this. There are narrated feedings. So rather than perhaps a free-for-all when a vampire is feeding, there is a narrated way of going about this. As I said, I've only had a really quick glance at the material. I haven't been able to completely get into each and every mechanic, character type, go through all of the disciplines, go through all of the clans, but at the moment, just on surface level, it seems to be an okay treatment. I'm looking forward to running at some point One Last Goodbye, which is the scenario that's accompanying this release, and seeing whether or not this actually has legs for a potential longer inclusion into a campaign. It would be also very, very interesting to see these new character types brought into a more open sort of a campaign with other character types, given that daylight is a problem for vampires. But if you've had a look at it, I would love to know your thoughts. Feel free to drop it in chat or drop me a DM if you've got any particular questions or concerns. So, obviously, Gen Con is going on, and there have been a bunch of notifications going off on my phone about what is happening with D&D. If you're not aware, I'm also not just a vampire freak, but I do run D&D Australia, which is Australia's largest fan group for D&D. So, the Gamer, thanks to Ham for this, has given a really good synopsis of everything that's been announced for Dungeons & Dragons in their keynote speech at Gen Con for 2026. There's a lot to go through, folks. We are seeing the return of a lot of old IP for D&D. It will be interesting to see the treatment as it comes into a more modern setting. We're seeing Wizards of the Coast take a look at some of their prime content from days gone by. We're looking at Greyhawk. We're also seeing a few more collabs with World of Warcraft crossovers, not unlike Vampire the Masquerade. We're seeing a bunch of updates for D&D Beyond, as well as, not included in this particular announcement, a Star Wars. Oh, I almost got the fandom up in arms. A Star Wars inclusion into D&D, which will be very interesting to break down. I just thought that I would mention it and say there's some interesting things happening at D&D, and I want to know why. I have my opinions. I'd love to hear yours, so let me know in chat. Now, drum roll, please. Without further ado, we are going to take a look at the new alpha playtest of Vampire the Masquerade, otherwise known as V6. So, if you missed the news this morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time, V6 is being playtested at Gen Con, and they are making that material available on Demiplane. So, what does this mean? What does it mean for the family? And what does it mean for your character choices moving forward? The World of Darkness, Paradox Interactive, has released an article on the changes one can expect to see in this new alpha playtest, and we should stress that it is just an alpha playtest. If you want to take a look at it, you can take a look at, let me get the link for you in chat. I had everything sorted and then everything died. There we go. The Paradox Interactive article is at that link. And we have a few bullet points of the sorts of changes that we can expect. We're looking at core system changes, some reimagined tension, so how to keep that, the beast versus your nature kind of thing heightened at your table. We're seeing some additional player and storyteller resources. We're looking at ideation and creation and how these can really look to amplify the physical and social conflict structure within a game of Vampire the Masquerade. And there's some new mechanics as well. And yes, it is all available on Demiplane, which we showcased last night. Or if that's not your jam, you can head to Drive-Through RPG and take a look at it there. So, taking a look. There are two packets that you need for this. There is the player packet and the storyteller packet. And these individually will give you everything you need to understand what's being presented within the playtest material and build some characters and run a story. Additionally, there is an FAQ on the Paradox Interactive website. So if you just want the Brody's notes of what's going on, what's happening, this is probably where you want to take a look. That being said, we can head straight to Demiplane. Now, you will not find it on the Vampire the Masquerade Nexus. In fact, it has its own Nexus, the World of Darkness Nexus. And if you are at all familiar with Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, one of the first things you will note is that there has been a change to the logo. So up here, you will see it's a lot more vampiric and bitey versus the old sort of treatment of the lines. We see a bit of a hark back to the bitiness even, of Vampire the Masquerade. Now, please hold in mind, front and center, that this is not a fully fledged, fleshed out system. This is an alpha playtest, and that is very different to a grab it and go system. Playtesting is its own discrete sort of discipline. There are certain things that they are looking to get out of this playtest, and your feedback can be beneficial or a hindrance to them taking that on board and going forward with any beta version of this. So, to that end, I thought we might have a little chat about what playtest actually is. Alrighty. Playtesting is not just grabbing the material and taking a look at it, running a game and deciding whether or not you like it. When a company puts a game out for playtest, they're asking for very specific things generally. They tend to want feedback on certain treatments. They want feedback on what was enjoyable, what was not. Absolutely. But more, does this work? Does this not work? How did you use this? What didn't work about it? How can we replicate that? Do you have any feedback for whether or not this might work? Oh no, does it? I don't have any dropped packets, Tal, and my connection seems stable. Okay, cool. Thank you. Tal. Oh no. Did my bat break everything? So yes, when you are playtesting something for someone, you look to approach it from a very much a more analytical perspective. Yes, you're playing a game, and yes, you should absolutely enjoy the time that you're spending doing that, but you really need to be taking notes. You need to be have an understanding of what it is that whoever has asked you to do the playtest is looking for, and look for ways to either break it or embrace it, if that makes sense. So, what are they looking for with this particular playtest? Let me see if I can find my notes. My apologies, folks. Everything died about 15 minutes before I pressed go, and I thought I was all set up. Where is it? Nope. Nope. It's all gone horribly wrong. Okay. Anyway. Where are we? I'm so sorry, folks. I was doing so well, and then it all fell apart. So, obviously, they've got a bunch of new mechanics. They want to know whether or not those mechanics... Streaming, what can go wrong? Quite a lot. Quite a lot, especially when you've got 15 browser tabs open that you're wanting to share information with people. Anyway, they want to know whether or not the core system changes work. They want to know whether or not the resources are enough for you to grab and go. They want to know whether or not the general mechanics, as well as the new mechanics that they are bringing in, make sense. So, one of the things that they are looking for is either short form feedback or long form feedback, and the release announcement holds links for both of those. I can put them in chat if you would like. Now, if you encounter technical difficulties, if you're going through the demi-plane links themselves, then you should submit your feedback for that directly to demi-plane. Paradox is looking for feedback just on the actual material. So if you end up using Storyteller, Notes, or Player Creation on Demiplane and you have an issue with the actual way that the platform is working, you should submit your feedback directly to Demiplane, not Paradox. Now, I'm not going to go into a rant about whether or not I think the mechanic changes and the character changes are good or bad. I don't know, Kaz, how long they're looking to leave them up for. The links on DriveThruRPG are available for you to download the resources. So conceivably, you could have access, once you've downloaded it, in perpetuity to those playtest resources. But if you have any specific questions like that, I would probably send it directly to the socials, or hop onto the World of Darkness Discord server, where there is a specific channel for V6, and you should be able to ask your questions there. Now, let's take a look at the actual World of Darkness stuff. Oh my goodness! Antipodean, you are too good. Thank you so much for the gifted subs. Everyone should go and give Antipodean a follow. No, wait. Ham? I mean, everyone should give Antipodean a follow, but also Ham. You are okay. You're okay. Wasn't you? My chat says otherwise, friend. Thank you so much. All right, so let's take a look at what the World of Darkness Demiplane Nexus has in store for us. So we can see that it's a 2026 public playtest. Their byline is Shape the Next Night, which I think is kind of cute. You can create your kindred, you can test out the new storyteller system, and help shape the next edition of Vampire the Masquerade. So, taking a look at the sources that are available, we've got the player packet and we've got the storyteller packet. Now, obviously, I am a storyteller, so I am going to be firstly interested at what's available for storytellers. I really like the way they've laid this out on Demiplane, and obviously they've put a lot of thought into the appearance, the ease of navigation. So taking a look at the storyteller packet, we're looking at the table of contents. We see some design goals, we see some playtest goals, the playtest focus, a bit of a rundown about what's changed and what hasn't, a synopsis of the player packet, a synopsis of the storyteller packet, the scenario, and then a bit of a note from the devs themselves. So we had some questions around the goals of the actual new system itself. So the goal of this playtest is to see how some of these rule changes play out with different groups of players. And that's why you would open this up to a playtest from the public, essentially. From there, to keep building the game in a direction that serves both the World of Darkness and the people who play within it. So while they've been designing this playtest, they've worked from a few design pillars. And I need to reiterate, this is a play test. This is not a fully finished and polished system. And sometimes what will happen, and I can't confirm or deny whether or not this has actually happened, but when you are developing a bunch of materials to playtest, you won't necessarily include everything that you've designed, because when you are playtesting, you've got very specific things that you want to take a look at under the hood, and so you may remove some mechanics, you may exclude some lore, some bits and pieces, so that the things that you want to get information on are the things that are being pressure tested by the playtest. So, if you weren't aware, Vampire the Masquerade is very... Holy crap, guys! Thank you so much! Kaz and Ham, you two are far too good. Far too good. Please go and give Kaz a follow, everyone. Guys, you're gonna give me like red cheeks. Ham always starts stuff he doesn't finish, goddamn bastard. You're just weak-willed. I find that very hard to believe, friend. So Vampire the Masquerade is based on the Storyteller system, which is a fully fledged system in and of itself. And what they're aiming to do with V6 is bring it back to the fold. V5 and a couple of previous editions kind of pulled away from the solid system of Storyteller system just a little bit. So they're hoping to bring it back into that Storyteller system. They're also hoping to give it a bit more of a modern dynamic gameplay with improvisation tools, some shared narratives. So actually pulling the camera, for want of a better term, away from the storyteller sometimes and handing it over to the players. They're looking to streamline some mechanics and support more social interactions at the table, which is one of the things that personally I love from Vampire the Masquerade. So how is this going to look? Well, they've taken play as a set of mechanics and perhaps some role players overlaid on top of that, and seen play as self-expression. Now, this is something that in academic circles we are very aware of. I say we as a frustrated academic, but anyway, go with me on this one. We talk about in academic circles as play being part of self-exploration, self-expression, and as a tool for investigating the self. So that's what we're kind of looking at here. We're seeing how the innate struggle between beast and humanity can help players explore themselves and explore how they might react to certain situations. We're seeing supposedly a set of mechanics that actually help improve player agency. So rather than being beholden to the mechanics, players are now able to verbalize and I guess have more agency over how they fail rather than being told, oh, the beast does this. One of the new mechanics that's coming in is also about how you suffer when things happen. And they're also looking to bring about more unique characters. One of the things with Vampire the Masquerade, because it's got such a long history, is obviously we can fall into those tropes and those stereotypes. Yesterday when we were talking about archetypes, they're there for a reason because they're super, super strong when you start looking at the clans. So one of the things that they're trying to do with V6 playtest is bring back that unique character type. And one of the other things that they're looking at is every choice having consequences, not just the bad ones. So we're looking at degrees of failure again. They did exist in V5, but it was maybe not a mechanic that was necessarily played with so frequently. You know that success at a cost. Instead, we've got degrees of failure. We've got the whole monster versus mortal thing, which is at the core of Vampire the Masquerade. And mortal versus monster. So how does your mortality play with the beast that's there. There's resource costing. So they've, from my understanding, they have changed the way that you fuel your discipline powers and actions. More on that later. And sacrifice. There are rules that have been created where you can sacrifice something in order to gain something else. So how that plays out at the table will be very interesting and probably very different from group to group. So, one of the ideas that has been shared around is that there's not a whole lot of conflict generated by just the play at the table. Yes, there's interpersonal tension, but they have brought in some new mechanics that will cause players to really think about their choices. So we've got choose your pain. In dire moments, players choose how they suffer and what complicates their situation, which brings a really unique bent to screwing up, right? Devil's bargain. You can introduce complications into your story to secure a success when you need one by paying a price negotiated with the storyteller. So this is just an extension or perhaps a reiteration of that success at a cost. Monstrous and Mortal, well, already Vampire the Masquerade played with that dichotomy of are you a human or are you a monster or are you somewhere in between? So having these two forces play on you and push you towards an outcome when you're faced with a decision you need to make, that's kind of nice. And also drama. Storytellers have a play-generated resource themselves that they can spend to trigger events, empower NPCs, and increase the stakes of the player's actions. So rather than just fudging stats or fudging dice rolls, there are actual resources that the players can see a storyteller spend to up the ante, so to speak, which I think is really nice. Like giving a storyteller some resource management as well. Yes, we've got a lot that we need to deal with behind the screen, but giving them a resource means that it's an additional trick up our sleeves to really help hype up the tension at the table. And lastly, we've got the plug and play experience. Playing and running the game are both easier and faster. Obviously, they've already gone and done instant tests. You need fewer steps and less prep to jump right in, and the rules help you push play forward without friction. We work towards this goal via the following. Character creation streamlined. Character creation happens in quick steps that also help players tell and discover their characters' stories. So my understanding from people who I've had chats with today who have gone through really quickly, character creation is they were able to create a playable character in 20 minutes. If you've ever sat down and tried to make a character in Vampire the Masquerade, you will know that that is possible, but they may not be as fully fleshed as you might like. We've also got simplified NPCs. You can just grab one NPC from the bunch of 20 that are in the storyteller's resources, but now in V6, NPCs are easier to run and quick to build, allowing the storyteller to make them mid-session, which is a boon, I tell you. When the coterie decides to go right instead of left and you end up going, oh, well, I didn't have anything prepped for there. Cool, I guess we're doing this on the fly. Having some really quick mechanics to make a bunch of NPCs that feel fully fledged is a big help, And we've got story events. There are a set of tools that lets the storyteller quickly generate events and situations for dynamic play. So while a character moment is happening over here, the storyteller has the resources they need to be able to come up with something on the fly, something not adapted for in the story. They're good to go. All right, so what are the goals of this playtest? The goal is to share these new explorations with the community and put the game to test. We want you to explore what we've done with the game and to discover what the community likes, what it doesn't, how players and storytellers interact with the game, and how we can support the style of play our fans want. At this stage of the playtest, we want to discover what the community thinks about some of the system's major elements. So really what they're looking for is these new things that we've got, or these adapted things that we've got, we want you to pressure test them. We're looking at core mechanics, so how dice pools are assembled, how you make tests, how difficulty affects those tests, and how players feel about the game's player-facing rules. Clan identities. This is a contentious point, I can tell you. I've been keeping an eye on the World of Darkness Discord server. Wow, there is a lot of emotion going on about this element. How distinct each clan feels, how they play differently from each other, and how you can make unique characters within these strongly flavoured clans. Humanity in the Beast. How it feels to have a monstrous side and a mortal side. How each clan's beast feels and plays differently from each other, how you hold on to your humanity and still satiate the beast inside you, how you embrace your monstrous side without losing yourself to it completely. Then there's also character creation and advancement. How easy is it to create your vampire, and how unique does it feel? How do these characters change over the course of a chronicle? So obviously they will be running this or allowing feedback for as long as it takes to run a chronicle. Discipline powers. How discipline powers work and how they're selected, how they can become more powerful as you hone your command of a discipline, and the experience of spending your resources to wield formidable vampiric powers. So then we've got a few playtest focuses. And so this is a section that we should pay attention to before we create our characters and before we start playing a game, to really understand, well, what is the focus of the test and what do we need to really hone in on and put under some pressure while we're playing. So they want to have a look at the humanity scale. So whether or not the struggle of the beast and what remains of a vampire's humanity is represented effectively, and whether or not your movement along that scale feels right and interacts with other choices you might make correctly. The beast and nature tracker, so the inner struggle between the beast and the remains of your mortal conscience is represented by the beast and nature tracker. Every night, both sides of you fight for dominance, and it's up to you which side you feed and which side you try to contain. Frenzy and outburst rules. When you ignore one side of your internal struggle for too long, its impulses can grow too strong for you to resist. In these situations, you risk partially losing control of your character, who is compelled to act in ways to satiate the neglected side. So, rather than just having a frenzy check, we've obviously got to check for the other side as well. Quickening. Success begets success. As you push yourself and pull off impressive actions, the vitae inside you quickens, charging with a potential you can harness. A resource specific to the player that can be spent to enhance roles, and it's gained through just standard roleplay. They also want to take a look at character creation and figure out whether or not you've got enough choices, the right choices, whether they interact well together, whether or not they make sense, that sort of thing. And we're looking at character advancement as well. So as you play and you get experience points, does it make sense the way you need to spend them? Does it reflect well enough what it means to be a vampire within the world of darkness? And do you feel like the advancement that you are creating for your character feels like you're actually moving forward, or is it more of a vainglory sort of motif? And then they want to look at the discipline powers and clan traits. So all of the discipline powers now work differently, and they focus more on active use of vampiric powers rather than any sort of passive abilities. And these are now represented by your clan traits. So some of the rules are optional and should only be used as needed, and some of them are definitely hard and fast rules that they're looking to bring in. So one of the things that they have asked is try them. If they don't work, let us know and let us know why. Now we get on to what everybody actually wants to know. What's changed? Difficulty now reduces the number of dice you roll on a test. So in V5, you will assemble your dice pool with your attribute and your skill, or your attribute and a discipline, or whatever it might be. And then your difficulty is the number of successes you need to get. In V6, that's changed, where the difficulty now takes dice away from your roll. So it really kind of ups the ante a little bit on each roll. There's a new mechanic, the quickening, that rewards players for rolling well, giving them a resource they can spend to improve their chances in future situations. And the storytellers also have a resource that they can spend to complicate circumstances or bring in some new twists to the story. Health and blood points have been combined into a single resource called Vitae. This is also a very contentious point because people are like, well, if you want blood points, just play V20. I get it, but no one's stopping you from playing V20. Anyway. The humanity tracker has been updated to the humanity scale, which is rather than just where is your humanity sitting at a point static sort of place, it is more of that spectrum of where humanity is at one end and your beast is at the other, or your monster is at the other. And there are repercussions on both sides of that for wherever you kind of sit on that scale. Players roll almost all the dice in the game, both to accomplish actions and to avoid things happening to them. So this takes away a lot of the instances where you would roll against the storyteller, and where the storyteller might fudge some rolls or might up the ante. Physical and social conflict share a unified procedure. So previously where we had social conflict, you know, having a different sort of play style, and physical having a different play style, they're both equally important. And I will say that that is one thing that V5 maybe didn't hit the mark on so well. They wanted social to be just as important as physical, but I feel like they may have downgraded physical conflict a little more than they thought they would have. So this will be interesting to see whether or not they've actually managed to hit the nail on the head with that. And many discipline powers now scale with you, growing in power as you gain dots. So where we've got a level 1 discipline power in V5, it would have the same level of efficacy as regardless of whether or not you had 1 dot in the discipline or 7 or 5 dots in the discipline. What this is telling me now is, as you get more dots in that discipline, as you grow in experience within that discipline, a level 1 is going to have perhaps still not be as powerful as a higher power, but it's going to have an increased power if you are stronger in that discipline. Well, I'm screwed. I couldn't roll well if my life depended on it. Same, friend. Whenever I'm a player, yeah. Or unless it's Barbel, she rolls really well and I don't know why. Anyway. So in the player packet, you get the game's core rules along with information for the players to make your character function. In the storyteller packet, you get guidance on how to run the game, what the new drama resource is all about, and how you can understand and use NPCs. Otherwise, you should also familiarize yourself with the rules that are in the player packet. The not in my domain scenario. This scenario was intended to test the core mechanics and flow of play. It includes 3 scenes: an exploration scene, a physical conflict, and a social conflict. It also provides NPCs for the characters to interact with and a tracker that escalates or de-escalates the danger based on the character choices. So again, because this is a play test, rather than just throwing the rules out, hey Shodan, and saying, hey, go run a game with us and tell me what you like. By providing a scenario, they've actually been very smart, because we've got goals, we've got a focus, we want to know about these specific things. Here's a scenario that is going to test these things we want to know about, rather than just giving you a green field. And then we've got a note from the devs. Welcome to the world of darkness. We are glad you're taking this journey with us. We are excited to be creating a new version of Vampire the Masquerade, and even more excited to be sharing this new vision with you all. With this playtest, we want to explore a streamlined system that makes rolling dice easier and faster, and new ways that you can explore the relationship between the monstrous nature of vampires and their persistence to cling to what remains of their mortal existence. We've also introduced mechanics that let players help create the story together with the storyteller, making the game more collaborative and encouraging everyone to play to find out what happens. We hope you dig into these changes, and we encourage you to tell us what you think of them. This is the first step in the development process, and we hope you will walk this path with us so that together we can make an awesome expression of Vampire the Masquerade. I really appreciate that. A lot of the time when you get information like this, unless it's an indie developer and you are literally being handed a physical packet from that developer group, a playtest can feel quite impersonal, and you feel like a bit of a cog in the machine. So having a note from the devs really kind of humanizes we're not using you for free labor. We want to co-collaborate, or like co-create Vampire the Masquerade together with you. I love how open they have made it, so open for the community. You do like the word open. I think that is the word of the day. So I'm not going to go through the entire storyteller packet because I haven't had a chance to really look at it, but we might move on to the player packet. So we've got we might have a lot of like crossover, but what we can see is there are a lot of the hefty rules in here, where the storyteller packet is more about storytelling, using the rules, what the tools are, the NPCs, and then that scenario that we were talking about. A lot of your meat and potatoes for character creation, for understanding the clans, for understanding mechanics is in the player packet. And that kind of goes back to the initial point that was in that introduction, where the storyteller needs to know these things, but really for everything else, go read the player packet. So we've got the usual suspects, really. The intro that we've just taken a look through. We've got what's here. What are the player principles? Now, this is something that I try and get across to all of my players for some varying degree of success. One of the ways that Vampire the Masquerade is different from your D&D or your Pathfinder, where you are the hero or a hero, in Vampire the Masquerade and generally the World of Darkness, you are powerful, but you are not a hero. You can do some cool stuff, but you are not going to save the day. And that sometimes for players coming from a D&D background is a hard thing to wrap their heads around. Another thing when you are playing Vampire the Masquerade, don't be afraid to fail. That is where you have those character growth moments. It's if your character, worst vampire Darlene, thank you. If your character isn't struggling, you don't have an interesting character. Fail. Set your character up to fail, because that is where the juicy part of the story actually is. Monster and mortal, powerful and vulnerable. Fighting isn't always the answer, okay? And yes, as a kindred, you might be more powerful, and sometimes it is best to smack something in the head and run away. Sometimes it's just best to sit down and have a talk. Worst Vampire Darlene Kaz has some amazing content. She breaks down a lot of hefty, dry lore of Vampire the Masquerade in a really entertaining way. So pursue your goals ambitiously. Your character should have a thing they want to achieve, and you should go after it. It shouldn't be something static and nebulous. It should be something you can achieve, and you should want to achieve it. Each choice is a loss and a gain. If you fail, you learn something. If you win, you get a little closer to what you're trying to achieve. Vampire the Masquerade is a game of secrets. There are secrets everywhere, absolutely everywhere. The idea of an unreliable narrator is key. Vampires are their own worst documenters, and just because you're being told something is by another vampire doesn't mean it actually is. So, be mysterious, but also look to uncover mysteries. No vampire survives alone. Look, we all love the idea of playing an edgelord. I don't play well with others. Look, it's a lot of fun once every now and then. But in Vampire the Masquerade, if you do not have people to buddy up with, you will get killed. It's plain and simple. You are not supposed to survive as a vampire without a group of other vampires watching out for your back, you watching out for theirs. You cannot be good at everything, and you never will be. You need a team, you need friends or associates to help you out with the things that they are good at. And enjoy the suffering. Be a haven in horror. Vampire the Masquerade is a horror game, first and foremost. And if you're not comfortable with that, this is not the game for you. Yes, there are laughs. Yes, there are shenanigans. But the horrific nature of your existence should be something that you are continuously reminded of, and you should want to lean into that. Going back to that play as self-expression or exploration, you should be at a table where you feel safe enough within boundaries set in your session 0 and your lines and veils session to explore what it is to be monstrous and have monstrous things sent back at you. If you do not feel safe doing that with the group of people you have, find another group. One of the reasons why I personally love Vampire the Masquerade is because I know I can be a really nasty, horrible person. I choose not to be. But Vampire the Masquerade gives me a chance to put a safety release valve on that, where I can play an absolutely horrible person in the context of a game. And I know it's time bound. And I know that I can shut the book on it and pick it up another day. And sometimes the things that my brain likes to throw at me that makes me go, oh, that would be really fun to do in real life. Gosh, I hate so-and-so in the office. I'd love to slam their head into a door. Well, my character's done that at a table, and actually I wasn't comfortable with the outcome from that. So maybe I wouldn't. So the next time that intrusive thought comes around, I can go, hang on. No, we don't actually want to do that. And it helps me make peace with those sorts of thoughts that come in. But if you're not comfortable being uncomfortable in that horror, Vampire the Masquerade is not the game for you. That being said, respect everybody's boundaries at your table. When you're talking about the game, respect the people that you are talking about the game with. Okay, rant aside. Cool. What have we got? Lines and veils for a reason. 100%. I refuse, even at conventions, I refuse to start a game without sitting everybody down and going, this will not be included. This will not be allowed. Does anyone have any personal things that they absolutely cannot have happen at this table for the next hour and a half? And they will be respected, or people will be asked to leave my table. We are here for fun in horror, not horror as fun, if that makes sense. All right, let's take a look at the world of darkness as we see it in V6. Did you know that you're a vampire? I really need to learn how to spell. Autocorrect can only get me so far. Look, I knew what you meant. It's totally fine. Okay, so there are some central premises to what it means to be a vampire in the world of darkness. There is the hunger. Blood is life, and you need it more than anything else. Every night, the beast inside you wants more. You can deny it for a little bit, but everyone eventually gives in. Blood is better than sex. It's better than tiramisu, and that's saying a lot. It's better than sunshine on your back. It's better than anything you could count it against. The blood is the source of the vampire's existence, but it is also a lot more. It's the drug you're addicted to. It's the fuel that powers your abilities. It's the tool you use to control the people around you and the world at large. The masquerade is a reflex to protect your existence. No mortal can know that vampires are real. Any vampire who breaks this rule, so going and telling people, I'm a vampire, a la Nick Cage, is a threat to all vampires. Mortals may be weak alone, but united, they could wipe out all of the vampires. Sunlight and fire. They are the true banes of a vampire's existence. They're two of the few things that can actually really, really, really hurt or potentially destroy one. Day sleep. Vampires must sleep during the day to exist at night, and they're vulnerable while they do so. You have to hide or protect themselves while you rest. There's a spelling error. Sorry, I can't go past the spelling error. I have to make a note of it. chapter 1. Day sleep. I'm so sorry, folks. Okay. Torpor, a deep sleep. No, look, conversation, Kaz, is totally fine. In a published thing that multiple sets of eyes have been over, that's different. And this is professional. This is, I do a lot of proofreading and editing. This is a professional nitpick that I have. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. I was going to ask if you did that one deliberately. So, torpor. We've got the day sleep, and then we've got torpor. Torpor is a deep sleep a vampire can fall into for a long stretch of time, and it's generally brought about by a loss of vitae, a stake through the heart, or making the decision to go into torpor. Final death. Vampires aren't easily destroyed, but it can happen through sunlight or fire, decapitation, or other harm that completely destroys the body. Thanks for swinging by, Kaz. Much appreciated. So, when a vampire meets final death, time seems to catch up all at once, and if they are old enough, they will crumble to dust in moments. Otherwise, the decay process will start almost instantly. Superstitions are mostly false. Books and movies would have you believe that garlic repels a vampire, that a crucifix holds one at bay and burns its skin, that the undead can't cross running water. None of it's true except with one exception. A rare few mortals can pour such genuine faith into a holy object that it really can repel or burn a vampire. Thankfully, they are very rare indeed. And then we get into a little bit around what it actually means to be a vampire in vampire society. I'm not going to read all of this out. Suffice to say, understanding what's going on in the world of darkness and understanding the nuances of existence really does help you build out a character and hit the table running with a strong sense of being a person in an existing society. We've got a lexicon here, so a bunch of terms and phrases that kindred use as they speak to one another or refer to one another. And then we've got the language of the game itself. Now, this is a very useful tool to have sitting beside you while you're playing for the first couple of times. I highly recommend having this on like a Word doc that you can refer to if you're not up to speed with Vampire the Masquerade. And just, constantly having it there to refer to, very helpful. Cool. Now we look at making your monster. And these are the basic rules of play, how you can start thinking about your vampire, what sort of characteristics you might have, how you might select your clan. I really like ordinarily, I despise tables. I think they are terrible. They don't work in a digital format, and I hate them with a passion reserved only for people who talk in the cinema. But this is also a really good way of presenting a lot of information that you would want to refer to. I also really like that they have just kind of gone, this character option is still in development. Now, one of the things that I am going to have a problem with, and I'm going to need to unpack this by myself, is the fact that the Hecata are no longer the Hecata. They are the Giovanni. I hate the Giovanni. I hate them. I want to burn them all with fire. after I've staked them, fuck the Giovanni. If you want to know the story, I will tell you at some other time, but fuck the Giovanni. But for the most part, everyone else looks to be named the same. Now, one of the things that we are seeing as details come to light is that the disciplines have been reworked, and so have the curses and the frenzies. Now, this is in part because of the change in mechanics, and again, I haven't really had a chance to unpack this, but we have seen that necromancy is back, y'all, and corruption is making a guest appearance. We can extrapolate some information from this before we delve into any deeper, and that would be that we are looking at a re-emergence, if you will, of things from earlier editions. So historically, the Giovanni and the bloodlines that came into and from the Giovanni were practitioners of necromantic arts. So that is why we are seeing that. In V5, obtenebration, so being able to wield shadows, was held by the La Sombra, and necromancy was held by the Giovanni. And that in V5 came together as oblivion. And while mechanically I understood why that was, it was explained as they both draw their power from the depths of the underworld in different ways. It did make it hard as a storyteller trying to help new players understand, well, sure, you can play a Hecata, but you don't have access to this particular discipline power because that's a La Sombra skill. Or vice versa. You want to play a La Sombra, but no, I'm not going to allow you to summon spirits because you're not a necromancer. You're a wielder of shadows. It was a little difficult, but I managed to navigate it because I understood what that was implicitly. Like, it's one of the bloodlines of the Hecata is my favorite clan of all time, so that knowledge came easy to me. But as a new storyteller coming in, I could understand why not having that previous history would make it difficult. So yeah, we can see that in V6, there's been a bit of a reworking of that. We are also seeing that the curse has been reworked and that the frenzy type has been reworked. So what was... yeah, you know, Nosferatu's still got cryptophilia as their frenzy type, which I guess would be the compulsion from V5. And then their clan curse is external beast. So that's just, you know, you look fugly as sin, dude. It is what it is. One of the things that people are a lot angry about is that Protean as a discipline has been removed and has instead been reworked into animalism. Again, I'm not 100% on the details, but I think it is a reworking of that discipline to not just be the ability to communicate with animals or have them as familials, but to harness the power, strength, and bonds, maybe, of the animal kingdom. Again, I'm not 100% on it, but that is what my thinking would be at this point. We've also seen that Chemistry, which was an amalgam power in V5, so you needed 2 disciplines at a certain level to be able to unlock Chemistry. Chemistry was a previous power of the Ravnos back in earlier editions, has been reworked into Telergy, which will be interesting to see what that is all about. one of the things that confuses me is that the Tremere also now have access to necromancy, because they never used to. And I don't understand why they do. But we come down to Tzimisce, and we are seeing vicissitude back as its own discrete discipline. That will make some Tzimisce players I know very happy. So, a new thing that's coming into V6 is a lot more focus on your sire as a bunch of mechanics, which I think will be very interesting to explore, especially as I'm trying to build new pre-generated characters for one-shots, because a lot of the time you don't actually get to explore that sire-childer relationship. So this will be really, really interesting. Generation comes down into it, and we do see a generation modifier. And then we've got life paths. So these are things that are going to give you additional skill points or XP points to spend in certain things, depending on how you came to be. Mortal life paths, vampire life paths. Again, as we were talking about yesterday, this makes it super, super important to understand the person you are playing before you understand the vampire. So then we get into some information about each life path. Then we get into attributes and skills. I'm not going to delve into that. There has been some reworking around these, but generally, like in how you would pick them, generally the overall impression is that the assigning of skill points and like what they can do remains the same. We are seeing skills, a little bit of a refining of skills, which is interesting. And then we get into clan disciplines, traits, merits, all those sorts of things. Now, one of the things that I have noticed just in scrolling through this is ghouls are back on the menu, baby. So we waited until the player's guide in V5 to get any really good guidelines on how to create a ghoul character. In V6, we're starting to see a little bit of good work around, well, what if I want to play a ghoul? What if I was a ghoul and then I got embraced? Surely I should have more points or have better understanding of social structure, that sort of a thing. So that will be interesting to play out as well. Bunch of merits, humanity scale, and your nature. Nice. So we are seeing a bunch of natures. Now this harks back to older editions of Vampire the Masquerade, where we would see essentially a mask and an actual like, who are you in society and who are you actually kind of a thing. So this would be really interesting to actually go through. I think building a character from scratch will be really fun, actually, especially for people who are familiar with older ways of character creation. Then we get into some weaponry and some finishing touches. So some calculations on how to give yourself the resources to spend while you're playing. I really like that there is a decent section on a session 0 and then how to create a coterie. So one of the things that happens in a session 0 in Vampire the Masquerade that may not happen or may not be as codified in, say, D&D is, how did you all get together? Now, sometimes that won't necessarily come into play right in session 1 of an actual game, because it will be quite literally how you all come together, but it's a really good way to understand before you even start your first session how you know each other or what you know of each other, why you are going to work with this person, what you can offer. It gives you an opportunity to kind of nut out those interpersonal relationships first, so that there's a little less awkwardness at that first session. There's also different types of coteries, and so these can place you in vampiric society a little bit better, embed you more in the community in your zone. Some coterie relationships, some coterie goals, domain, advancement, attributes and things like that, so you know how to spend your XP and when you should spend them, and then what that actually means. Diablerie, always a question that comes up. So that is the taking of a vampire's entire blood and their soul. It's also called the forbidden sippy sip, and generally frowned upon, but a really good way of getting some extra power. So that is a really quick run through of what is in the basics of creating a character. Now we look at the clans, which we kind of ran through briefly before. They look samey same with, minor differences. A lot of people are up in arms because, oh, they've done this, or oh, they've done that. Yeah, a reworking is going to change things. But I will say, people get up in arms with every minor addition change. So if you think you can do better and you're complaining, go write your own goddamn edition of Vampire the Masquerade with blackjack and hookers, goddammit. All right, rules of the night. So these are the core rules, basically. When you attempt something and failing would carry significant consequences that could drive play in a new direction. When you attempt something and there is opposition working to hinder you or to keep you from your goals. When you lack the right skill set, gear, or preparation to handle a problem that can affect the current situation. When you as a player would simply prefer to roll. Be aware that dice carry consequences that affect your character and the story in significant ways. Not once, significant ways. Chapter 4. Using the rules. Spelling error. And when time is a factor, such as when you risk losing your chance at something unless you act quickly, that is when the rules come into play, because the outcome is uncertain, which I think is a great way of actually saying when you need a dice roll, because you shouldn't always, not everything should come down to a dice roll. Sometimes you should just succeed at something because you have prepared, because you have made sure there are no hindrances, because you know what you can do so implicitly and you know how to do this thing. The rules presented here are the standard rules of the game, applied universally throughout play. Sometimes, though, a more specific rule contradicts them. When a specific rule offers a way of handling a situation that conflicts with the standard rule, the specific rule supersedes the standard rule and is used in its place. I find that people go, this is this is contrary to the thing that you said here. Okay, well, clearly you missed a paragraph. Just naming things that I've seen today. Sorry. So we know tests from V5. They are something that we are very familiar with. So there has been a change to what constitutes a success. You are still rolling D10s in Vampire the Masquerade 6th edition, but in V5, 6 and above was considered a success, and in V6, 8 and above is a success. So we have upped the risk for failure, and instead of having hunger points that we need to swap out dice for, we now have dice taken away from our dice pool. So that means that failure is more likely. That being said, every now and then you're going to get some extra successes, and we account for that in the rules. So we've got painful failure. If none of your dice result in a success and at least one comes up with a 1, you suffer a painful failure. On top of the normal consequences of a failure, you must also choose your pain. At the storyteller's discretion, you can forego choose your pain and suffer some other major consequence or change in your situation instead. Work with your storyteller to determine how things get worse. Devil's bargain. If you roll a failure but really want to succeed, you can propose a devil's bargain to the storyteller. The storyteller can reject it, but must spend 1 drama to do so. To make a devil's bargain, propose a complication that will arise in play. The storyteller and other players can make a case for different or modified complications that fit the story better. If the storyteller accepts the complication, treat the test as a basic success and give the storyteller 1 drama back. You can't propose a devil's bargain on a painful failure. You can propose a devil's bargain only once per scene. Now we look at choose your pain. So throughout the game, you will be asked to choose your pain whenever things get complicated. This most often happens when you roll a painful failure, though other rules or circumstances can call for it too. When you must choose your pain, pick one of the following options. If an option asks you to lose something you don't have, you must choose a different one. Alternatively, you can work with your storyteller to complicate your situation instead. So some suggestions they have here are lose 3 vitae or willpower. Lose all your quickening, and you can't choose that if you've got no quickening. Mark 1 box off your beast tracker, or give 1 drama to the storyteller. And there are actually codified rules now for trying again. So when you make a test, your character's doing everything they can to succeed in a risky situation. And a failure usually means the circumstances have shifted enough that simply repeating the same action wouldn't work. Failure carries consequences. Sometimes you can attempt the same action again, but only once. However, it requires a different approach than the first attempt, and only if the second try meets all of the following. So a different approach, so utilizing different attributes and skills, increased difficulty, so turning it up a little bit, or a painful failure. So there is some change to what happens when you've got no dice left, because things can be taken away from you. Vitae damage, how we treat damage is different now a little bit. How we deal with recovering Vitae, what the rules are in and around willpower and willpower damage and how we recover willpower, how we treat time. So we've got turn, round, scene, night, session, story, downtime, and chronicle as discrete units or measurements of time. Talking about distances, because obviously different abilities will have a different effective distance. Movement, so again we're codifying these sorts of things, whereas in V5 it was all very open to interpretation, and I want to do this, I want to go here. There were advanced rules for that sort of a thing, but not very many people referred to the advanced rules for them. Coordinating, interacting, prolonged tasks, downtime tasks, tiers of play. So we've got, different ages of vampires. We've got different types of creatures that might be interacting in the world. They've got different abilities and time frames that they can operate within. How attacks work, how called shots work, called shots results table, which is nice to have, just as something to refer to. Feeding attack. Different types of attacks. Social conflict. Cool. So we've actually got some codified ways that we can attack in a social setting rather than it being role played, because some players do play social movers and shakers but may themselves not be very confident to do that at the table. And in V5, yes, there were rules around it, but again, for the most part, it just got played out. Whereas codifying these rules will give those players something to lean onto and hang what they are comfortable role-playing on top of. So that's really nice. Exploring the world, so how we go about exploration, humanity and the duality between beast and nature, taking a look at trackers, impulses and beliefs, filling out our trackers, role-playing with them. So when you're at a certain level, what does that look like for your character and how will that play out? I think a lot of what we're hearing on social media that is pushing up against this new rule set is just V5 has now been out for 8 years and I've finally started to get comfortable with it and how I've homebrewed it to make it what I'm comfortable with playing. I don't like these new rules. And when I've come back in conversations with, you can keep playing that. No one's stopping you from playing it. The response to that, or the rebuttal to that, is, yeah, but there's not going to be any continued support for this system. To which I've then wanted to respond with, well, V20 has been out of support for ages and people are still playing that. D&D 3.5 has been out of support for donkey's years and people are still playing that. No one's stopping you from not playing your game anymore. And if you've homebrewed it to make it comfortable, you're not playing the game stock standard anyway. So why do you care if there's not going to be any more official sources for the edition that you think you are comfortable with playing when actually you're not? You can take the sources. You can take the Chicago by Night book for V6 and look at what it's presenting and decide what you're going to cherry pick and pull into your homebrewed V5 anyway. You know, you can take an Alien Hunger from 1st edition and play it in 5th edition. So long as you understand what the story is, you can change how the story plays out mechanically for any mechanical system. A story is a story is a story. If you want to utilize the mechanics of a new system, use the mechanics of the new system. Once you get comfortable with them, then start homebrewing it and get comfy with it. I don't understand. Am I going to have difficulty wrapping my head around this now that I've been so heavily embedded in V5? Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the same level of time I did when V5 came out to really pore over the books and educate myself on how it's supposed to play. But you learn by doing. And so, oh no, I'm just going to have to play a whole lot of games. What a shame. Hate that for me. But I am really looking forward to running and playing in some of these games utilizing this new rule system. We've also got some ready-made characters. I really like that the art style for this is harking back to the old styles as well. Like, don't get me wrong, I think V5 is delicious with that photorealistic style, but there is something so ridiculously evocative of just this plain black and white. I can't tell you why I like it, I just do. So we've got some ready-made characters there. We can open the digital sheets on Demiplane, or we can download the PDFs as well, which is kind of great. And then let's take a look at the credits, because I think they deserve to be looked at. So Martina Zich, Outstar, did the character portrait art. Isn't that lovely? And then we've got the Demiplane team here. We are going to take a look at the character creator for World of Darkness V6 playtest. What are we doing? Bongo drums. Thanks, Shodan. Oh no, are you taking your time? There we go. Oh, okay, well this is just delightful. This is really, really nice. I don't like how this is wrapping. Character creation. Enter a name. Wraps. I don't like that. Make that font size smaller. We are going to make them test face, because why not? Yeah, that should break. That should break into a new line. I don't like how that wraps. All right, we don't have any portraits to go from. We're not going to load one up. Let's take a look at what's available in preferences and rules. So you can make a young character, and that does limit some of the life paths and extra skills and dots that are available. I think for this first run, we are just going to go stock standard. So again, we see some reiteration of what the focus is, what the goal is, and what has changed. So at this stage, you know, it's what was in the intro that we read before. So we're going to go begin. What are you? The first step in character creation is determining which creature of the night you have become. The creatures of the night table details each type you can play, along with its relevant details. So let's take a look. We've got a neonate vampire we've got an ancilla vampire, and we see the return of the elder vampire. I think we're going to go with a neonate to start off with. One of the things that I do love about demi-plane is the tooltips that come up. Okay, so we are going to go with a vampire. Oh, you can be a vampire, you can be duskborn, which are our thin bloods, or you can be a ghoul. So we are going to go with a vampire, and we are going to go with neonate. Choose your generation. We are going to be 12th generation. We see a table here that tells us what our modifier is, but for neonates, it's kind of the same regardless. And then choose your clan. So in the playtest, we've got Bruja, Gangrel, La Sombra, Ministry, I think, Toreador, and Ventru. I think... Oh, we don't have La Sombra, even though they are quote unquote... Oh, no, we do. There. Okay. I think we are, because I can't do a Hecata, we're going to go with La Sombra. Excellent. Then we can choose the discipline that we get. Well, has to be Oblivion. Although I would love to know what corruption is. So let's take a look at the both. So Oblivion involves manipulating shadows to hide or transport you or your words, frighten or capture potential prey, and transform you into an unliving shadow. And then we've got a bunch of discipline powers that are available underneath that. Corruption. This discipline involves causing corruption, as it says on the tin, tempting others away from their firmly held beliefs and poisoning the minds and bodies of others. Well, as fun as corruption sounds, I do believe we're going to go with Oblivion, simply because that is the quintessential La Sombra thing. Cool. And then we move on to your sire. So this is where we look at the type of sire that we had and the impact they probably had on our lives. We've got an adoptive sire, so another vampire took you under their wing. You were brought up by someone who didn't create you. Brood child. You were raised in a brood of vampires, either created by the same sire or different ones, so they like put you in a vampire nursery. Caring sire. As it says on the tin, they took care of you. They taught you the ins and outs of vampire society, helped you learn how to hunt, how to utilize your power, who's who in the zoo, all that sort of stuff. A cruel sire. You learned what you could to survive and grew stronger for it. A manipulative sire who used people and vampires like pawns on a chessboard. You were often a piece in your sire's schemes, and though it took you a while to realize it, you learned how people's emotions and beliefs can be used to sway them in the direction that you want. So what we're seeing now is your clan dictates one of your disciplines, and then your sire will dictate the additional ones. Rather than your feeding type in V5 helping instruct some of your other disciplines that you might have access to. We've got a secretive sire who taught you how to remain unseen and hide. We've got unknown sire. You never knew them. You awoke from your embrace and they were already gone. So you learnt what you could for yourself. And we've got vigilant sire. So your sire was very demanding and watchful of your every move. You couldn't afford mistakes, and severe punishments tended to happen. And each of these gives you access to one of 3 disciplines, or if you are from one of the adoptive sires or brood child, you get 1 dot in a discipline from a broodmate's clan. So I think because we are La Sombra, I feel like I probably had a cruel sire, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, and all that. And that gives us access to dominate, fortitude, and obfuscate. Well, what is a La Sombra without their dominate? All right, then we get on to life paths. And we've got 2 of these that we can look at. So a life path represents your experiences across the years. These might represent what you did before you were embraced, or how you interact with the mortal world as a vampire. So you've got representative of the past rather, and this kind of a life path is generally who you were, which can but doesn't have to inform who you are today. And then you've got life path as competence. So when you are trying to go for a test or something like that, but no skill really applies, you can harness your life path as additional dice in your pool for that. Okay, so then we've got mortal life paths. We've got artist, corporate, executive, criminal, holy person, hunter, military, politician, or technician. And then for vampire life paths, these are then further broken down into your age as a vampire. We've got blood deliverer for neonates, cleanup crew for neonates, hound for neonates. I rather think that we are probably blood deliverer, utilizing those shadows perhaps to hunt to and fro. Or maybe we're a hound. That's kind of fun. Where are we? There. So let's go with, I'm going to go with hound, I think. And I think for a human side of things, we were probably military, maybe, because that sounds like fun. All right, now we've got some skill dots to spend. So we've got 5 skill dots. Well, let's go with fighting, investigation, subterfuge, survival, schmival, shooting. Yeah, maybe we'll go with 2 for subterfuge. So that's 5 dots, and then 3 resource dots. So we've got status in a sect, repository for an army, which I think we get from military, and contact vampire authority. 1, 2, let's just go with 1 dot in each, just as a nice spread. Oh no, they were just for hound. Okay, then we get additional dots for military. Cool. So then we'll go 1 in athletics, 1 in medicine. What is survival as we see it in V6? Okay, no, it is what survival normally is. Okay, well, I think we might up our fighting and our athletics. And our shooting. Why not? And then we've got focuses. So I feel like in athletics, we'll probably do running as one of our focuses. And in fighting, we would probably do, I feel like improvised weaponry is a really good one to have. It's handy. First aid, we've got heavy weapons in shooting. And then we've got some resource dots. Well, I think we'd be remiss to not put one in weapons. And I kind of like the idea of having an ally as a former comrade, but I think we would not have a contact in the military other than our former comrade, simply because we wouldn't want to breach the masquerade. So I'll put another dot into our repository. All right, now we get to attributes and skills. So we've got 15 attribute dots to throw around. Now for a neonate, 7, 5, and 3. So let's take a look at how that will play out. It's right down the end here. Okay. So we've probably got a primary focus on physical, a secondary focus on mental, and a tertiary focus on social. So probably go, and this already tells us which focus, like how many dots we need to spend in each. So probably go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for our physical. For social, we get 3 dots. So I would say we probably put 1 each in manipulation and composure. And then I'm inclined to go with an additional in composure because we've fought in the military. We've had a shitty sire, so we've probably learnt to swallow it down a bit. And then we've got 5 dots to spend in mental attributes. So I feel like 1 each in all of them. And then I would think wits rather than intelligence, and resolve to just get through it and get stuff done. Now we look at our skill dots, and we've got 8 dots to spend. So I would put 1 in awareness, and I feel like our sires taught us to be very good at reading people and knowing what they're going to be up to doing. Expression is a term that got replaced in V5 with craft, and it's more how you express yourself through the arts and whatnot. Knowledge is more of that academic sort of side of things. We see sabotage coming in, which brings in larceny and hacking. So I feel like we can probably pick a lock. I feel like we can pick a lock. We can probably be persuasive, but probably through intimidation rather than any other sort of less fraught ways. We've already got 1 dot in medicine, and we did have a focus in there, but it removed it, so that's interesting. I think we might have 1 in knowledge and just go with military history. Why not? And then we've got a few more dots to put in, so go with investigation, and we'd have a focus of streetwise. So I can see what they've done here is they've really refined the skills. Rather than having a massive table of them, they've kind of bucketed them together in an attempt to, I guess, reduce the amount of space skills takes up on the sheet. So adding awareness up to 3, I'm probably going to go with a second focus in instinct. And then we've got 1 more dot, so let's go with running. And we are going to go with throwing. And that is all of our skill dots put in place. Now we get to step 6 of character creation for V6, and we start distributing clan discipline dots. So we are La Sombra, and with that comes dominance, potence, and oblivion. So I gotta have my shadow boys. We are going to put 2 dots in oblivion, and we're already pretty buff, but we might put 1 dot into potence. Then we choose our discipline powers, because we've already got 1 dot in dominate. We get to choose from that as well. And we've got apathy. You use your supernatural powers to suppress a target's emotions, leaving it numb. You know what? I don't mind that, but I do want command very much. I would, however, like, so some of these are not available. I would like a filter on these to show me what's available and what isn't right now. That would be nice. None of these are really, they're not available anyway, but they're not really what I'm looking for. Now, I do like the idea of soaring leap, maybe, or perhaps shadow tools, where you manipulate nearby shadows, compressing them into useful forms and creating tools and small objects of solid shadow. That would be a lot of fun. Although then she saw grasping shadows, which is all very Arms of Ahriman. Your command over shadows grows so strong that you can now make a target's own shadow physically grasp its owner. Yes, please. Then we will have command from dominate. And Shadow Tools lets you make a shadow sword. I know, right? It's so cool. Or a shadow lockpick. A shadow fork. Just like so many things. Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to go with Shadow Tools. Because I need it. And then we've got one more, which I think... kind of like the idea of Cloud of Darkness. Just as that, you know, true wielder of shadows. Right! A shadow fork and plate. No more dishes ever. Who cares if you haven't paid the water bill in 400 years? You don't need it. All right, now we get to clan traits. And so what we have available at the moment is Eyes of the Night, Shadow Cloak, and Tenebrous Reach. So Eyes of the Night, you can see anything that goes on within any darkness you create with your Oblivion discipline. Very important if we are utilizing a power that can make the entire space very dark. And then we've got one more. So we've got Shadow Cloak, which is like in V5. Shadows coalesce around you, giving you a bonus to tests related to hiding or sneaking. And... oh, that's a terrible, terrible way to put that. Not having the copy fully available is annoying. All right, so... basically, it can make you oopy, spoopy, scary, or it can hide you. But I do like the idea of Tenebrous Reach. That being said, we've already got Shadow Tools, so maybe Shadow Cloak is a better option. Now we get to look at merits. And in V5, this is generally the bit that takes me freaking forever. But as a neonate, we get one merit. That's it. That's all you got. So what we have available is Bond Resistance, Code of Honor, Flexible Limbs, Forgettable Face, Friends in High Places, Hunger Strength, Intimidating Presence, Might, Prestigious Sire, and Subdued Hunger. Well, you know what? I kind of like the idea of us just being a scary war guy. So I feel like a code of honor would be important to this guy. That was easy. I mean, it helps that this is a playtest module and that we don't have 8 years worth of books to go from. But also, now we get to choose our nature, and this plays into our humanity nature scale. Sorry, beast nature. Monster nature. We'll get there eventually. So... what have we got? We've got Autocrat, Bon Vivant, Bravo, Gallant, Perfectionist, Romantic, Scientist, and Survivor. Well, I would probably choose between Bravo and Survivor, and I kind of think this, I'm more leaning towards Survivor for this character, just because you always pull through, surviving whatever the world throws at you. Well, if you couldn't do that, you wouldn't have been made a vampire by a La Sombra, given they like to tear you down a little bit before they build you back up as a kindred. All right, now we've got resources to play with. Very important, because you're not going to last very long as a kindred if you don't have access to some kind of resources. All right. So we've got status, repository, contact, repository. So we've got an armory and weapons themselves. Potential contact in the military, an ally, so former comrades, and we can also put points into a coterie haven. Can we do? We can add our own resources, so a physical asset, a social asset, or wealth. I think I'm probably going to give this guy... Nah. Oh, well, that's annoying. It takes us right back. Okay. That's fine. No, you know what? I want to give him some wealth. And I dare say he's probably got a ghoul, perhaps? Social asset. Are you a ghoul? Okay, maybe it's not a social asset. Is it a physical asset? Nope. Okay, maybe it's an ally then. Ally? Ghoulie McGhoulface. There you go. Add resource. We're going to give him 2 dots because he's a pretty good ghoul. And then we are going to give him some wealth. I've got 1 dot in wealth. Excellent. Now we get to important items. So important items are things that you carry that might be useful to your activities that night. A precise inventory isn't necessary, but a few key objects can make a difference. So assume your character has some form of ID, cell phone, and keys to your haven. You also get 1 additional item per life path you had, provided the item fits that life path. So... We're going to give him a weapon. We are going to give him a heavy weapon. It is going to be ranged. It is... Let's go with... far away. Name, gun, plenty. It's an automatic rifle. That'll do. There is a spelling mistake there. I'm going to have to go through this. And then another important item... So that's for our military. What was our other life path? Hound, that's right. What might a hound want to have on hand? I feel like maybe... a stake is still a weapon. I've got it. The name is Eleanor. And she is the car. You know the one. All right, then we get to finishing touches. enter character details. So the archetype that we're going for is a stoic soldier. Age in their mid-30s. Actually, no, they're probably like 69. Nice. Their apparent age, they're probably around their mid-30s. Date of embrace. You know what? Whatever. 19... '82, that'll do. And the 80s was their nostalgic decade. Then we get to flaws. Everyone has problems, and your character is no exception. These problems are another way to make your character unique and to drive new and interesting stories around them. Adversity shapes who you are. So let's take a look. Has a flaw. Gambling. Likes the cards and roulette. Should never step foot in a casino if they don't want to lose him. The coterie. Should never step foot in a casino if they don't want to lose him to the tables. There you go. So now that those basics are out of the way, we are not going to give him any additional XP. So we're good. And then we take a look at our character sheet. So right off the bat, between V5 and V6, the attributes look the same. The skills are condensed, and then we've got some new trackers. So we've got Vitae, willpower, and then we've got our nature and beast and where our humanity is sitting on that tracker. We've got our conditions, which come as a result of what our trackers are currently sitting at. We've got what our actions can be. So general actions, physical conflict actions, social conflict actions, exploration actions, and downtime actions. Having those on the sidebar is really nice. We've got our disciplines here with our roles right next to them. That's really nice. Plus the associated cost. Then we've got our weaponry, what it costs to use our blush of life, where we are for frenzying and what that looks like, what blood bonds we might have, whether or not we've diablerized anybody. That was something that was missing from V5. There was rule sets there, but it wasn't really reflected on our character sheet unless we went in and changed our generation. And then we've got our success, failure, and painful failure for our diablerie. So this is our actions and disciplines. Then we go over to features and resources. We can see our resources here that we put in and the items that are important to us. We can see what we get as being part of Clan La Sombra. So our beast, our clan curse, and our frenzy. We've got our traits that we chose earlier, our life paths, and our merits. Details. This is all the information that we put in that makes our character a person. And then we've got a journal, which is a lovely thing to be utilizing, especially in a digital format. Now, I know D&D Beyond and I know that Demiplane does offer this, but I don't see a lot of people utilizing it. They will tend to make notes in some other format. And I think that that is a false economy. Having everything in one place. Yes, it means if something fails, you lose absolutely everything, but it's a bit hard to reconstruct a character from a journal entry on something else. Anyway, I like how this is laid out. I like the look of it. I have a minor concern about accessibility because I don't think these have good enough text to background contrast ratio. Likewise with these, it is a minor concern, mostly because, hang on, there is, so in a fully fledged thing, you will see different character themes, and you can export this to PDF, which will remove all of the background and stuff like that. But part of my immediate feedback will be there is not an accessible option. I have a lot of concerns about the red on red and the grey, or the white on black, or the grey on black. It's not accessible. And then we've got our quickening counter here, which is really handy. So yes, that is how to create a character for the V6 playtest. I am going to put the landing page for the playtest and also the demi-plane sources that you might like to take a look at there. Yes. So we've taken a look at Bound by Blood very briefly. We had a quick little chat about it. We had a pretty good look at the resources that are available for players, which do constitute the majority of what is available for players and storytellers. Now, as I said before, this is also available on DriveThruRPG as a downloadable PDF. It is free, so if Demiplane is not your platform of choice, you can head on over to DriveThruRPG. Let me just put those links in the chat for you now, and then promptly get told off by my own chatbots for putting in too many goddamn links. The number of links is too high. So yes, I will be spending part of the weekend going through this with as fine a tooth comb as I can. I will let you know that very quietly there may be, in the next little while, not too far away, a little secret where you can see all of this in action, but you will need to check out my socials for more details. It's all a little hush-hush at the moment while we finish everything, because obviously this all came out just this morning, but there might be a little something on the way. I would also be very interested if anybody would like to be part of a non-broadcast playtest of this. Let me know. You don't need to know anything about Vampire the Masquerade. You don't need to know anything about the system or the playtest. In fact, the less you know, the better, because I would love to play with a bunch of experienced players, V5 players, and completely new players. But there is a lot going on for Vampire the Masquerade at the moment, and it's a very exciting time. So with that in mind, I am going to take a little break. And then when we come back, we're going to dive into the storyteller resources in a little more depth. Grab yourself something to hydrate, grab yourself a little snack, then strap in and we'll get stuck into what it is to be a vampire storyteller for V6. See you on the flip side. That's enough, thank you, music. Quiet now. We're back! Well-oiled machine, I tell you. Okay, so we talk a lot about the bulk of the rule set. We made a character. We understand a little bit more how it all comes together. Obviously, this is something that happens, that you get, that clicks the more you do it. So let's take a look at what it means to be a storyteller. Okay, so we've got some basics here. What it means to actually be a storyteller. This is pretty standard stuff if you've ever run a game. Like, this is your position at the table. This is what you facilitate. As the storyteller, you have an important role to fill. While you don't get to play the main characters of the ongoing story, you get to have fun doing other things that can be just as rewarding and exciting. One of the main goals of a storyteller is to challenge the player characters, creating situations that put them to the test and force them to make difficult choices. I feel like that's the main focus of this edition, is really hitting home that the choices you make have an impact, not just on you, but on the world that you're operating within. So in addition to making all of these situations for the player characters to operate within and you know, be challenged by, you're also given drama, which is that resource where you get to spend it to empower NPCs or to insert complications or, you know, up the stakes, that sort of a thing. Which I guess is like key points, really, except storytellers aren't monks. Anyway, the basics of play. The game is run like a structured conversation that is sometimes adjudicated with the use of rules. That's at the essence of the storyteller system, is we're all sat at a table or online and we are all telling the story together. The rules are there to provide a framework for that conversational storytelling that is happening between players and NPCs, between the world, because the world is also a character in this story. And they are there to help resolve things. The rules should never be there to instruct what can or cannot happen. If a player wants to do something, you figure out whether or not the rules facilitate it, or rather whether or not it is something that the character and the player who has made the choices for that character has set them up to do successfully. And if you're not sure, that's when the dice roll and the rules come into play. Whereas, you know, yes, in D&D, you can play a very role-play heavy game that is more like that, but realistically, Dungeons and Dragons is a rule set upon which you place roleplay, not the other way around. At least that's my understanding anyway. Everything starts with the storyteller describing the current situation in which the players find themselves. This guidance expands on the basics of play introduced in the player packet, focusing on what you as a storyteller should consider. So, step 1, set the scene. What are they looking at? What are they smelling? What are they seeing? What danger is there? What are they trying to achieve? All those sorts of bits and pieces. Who is there? Who isn't there? All those sorts of things that are important and help give a place for the player characters to operate within. Step 2, player exploration. They engage with the situation, they ask questions, you inform or not. This is fairly fundamental to running a game anyway. Then we get to step 2A, set the stakes. You take the player's intended course of actions that they've told you after you've set the scene and they've said what they would like to achieve, and you tell them the probable consequences and risks involved in their actions. Sure, you can do that, but this might happen if you fail, and this might happen if you succeed. This is a step to make sure that everyone clearly understands what can happen, and it solves so many problems that I hear from players where they go, my storyteller or my GM set me up to fail. Well, then they clearly didn't tell you what the stakes were and what you were trying to achieve or do. So make sure the players understand what can happen and if their decisions can lead to dangerous situations. Avoid springing threatening events on the players without them knowing it was something that could happen. Like, yes, there is something to be said for a jump scare while you're role-playing. But if someone is saying, I'm standing in the middle of an open field, it's full moon, so there's pretty good visibility, I want to go running in the field. Well, then, a giant hole in the ground shouldn't open up and swallow the player without there being some warning of, sure, you can do that, but you do know this field is notorious for giant holes opening up to swallow them. Spend drama, so that new resource, to change the situation and inform the players of the change. So, as a storyteller, you present the scene, you present the potential risks, you present the potential rewards. You hear what the players want to achieve and you go, okay, but this could happen, either way, good or bad. They then go, I still want to do it. And if you as a storyteller really want something to happen, you can spend some of your resource to make it happen. It's a visible way of saying, I acknowledge that you have made a decision. I, as a storyteller and a player at this table, really want this to happen. So I am choosing now to spend part of my resource that I have available to me to make that happen. In the full knowledge that that means I may not have a point to do something else later on down the line. If there are no stakes or the stakes aren't high enough to warrant making a test, such as the player's choice is to open a cabinet in an abandoned house to look for cutlery, and there isn't intended to be any challenge in opening the cabinet or an enemy hiding in it, skip to step 3. Step 2B, player's decision. After the players understand what can happen, they can commit to their course of action or can decide to do something else. So this allows them to act accordingly once they are informed of all of the risks in the area. If the players decide to change their plans, skip to 2A, rinse and repeat. The stakes are reset, the drama isn't spent. Cool. Step 3, play the consequences. Once the players have decided their course of action, you determine and can describe what happens next. This can be done with or without the rules. Remember the guidance in using the rules in the player packet. It is important to know when to use the dice and when to not use the dice to resolve the actions. Now, this came up fairly recently in TTRPG news where someone role-played what they wanted to do so well that Brennan Lee Mulligan went, you don't have to roll. You just get it. That was superlative. And people were up in arms about it. Oh, that's not part of the rules. That's not how the game works. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. The first rule in almost every game is having fun at the table. If the rules get in the way of having fun, then you don't engage with the rules for that moment. Some people call it the rule of cool. Some people call it the golden rule. Whatever it is, the first reason you decide to play a game is to have fun. Real simple. If the rules are used, determine what kind of test the players need to make and let them know the difficulty of the test. They need to know the difficulty to calculate their dice pools and evaluate if they need to seek other advantages to have a better chance of succeeding. So, for instance, if you say, sure, you can run through this field, but there might be a giant hole that opens up and swallows your character whole. And the player goes, yeah, no, I still want to do that. Cool. You've informed them of the potential risks. They have chosen to do that. And as you play the consequences, the storyteller can say, awesome, I want you to make an let's go with a stamina. No, I want you to make a dexterity and athletics roll. As you're running through this field, you do indeed see a giant hole open just a little bit in front of you. Do you have what it takes to avoid getting swallowed whole by that hole? Haha. So you would go, make your dexterity and athletics, and your difficulty is 5. Meaning you need to get 5 successes. So in V6, you would need to calculate your dice pool, take a look at how many dice you've got in your hand and go, do I first of all have enough dice in here to get 5 successes, being anything that rolls 8 and above? Or do I need to see if I can do something else to better my chances? But either way, you as the storyteller have informed them of their options, informed them of the potential consequences, given the player room to make an informed decision, and then once they have made a decision, opened the table and the scenario to play out those consequences. You have then, rather than giving them a gotcha, informed them of what they need to do to win at this. It's all about informed consent, folks. That's why we do safety tools. That's why we do lines and veils. That's why we do session 0. There is no fun if you go, yeah, I'm just going to smash you. How is that fun for a player if the storyteller holds all of the cards? It's just not. After the consequences of the player's actions take effect, the cycle starts again and you return to step 1. So that is the essence of storytelling in the storytelling system. Anything beyond that are bolt-on sorts of rules. We hear a lot about adversarial GMs or DMs, and I think it's really good that in this playtest material, we've got some storyteller principles. First and foremost being, you are not the enemy. You play potential rivals and enemies for the player characters, but you are not them. You are a player at the table and a facilitator of the story. You are an arbiter of the rule set, and you help direct the camera of the story. You shouldn't be an adversary to your players, ever. That isn't fun for anybody. If you think it's fun being an adversary to your players, then your players are not having fun. You're not being a storyteller or a GM or a DM. You're being a bully. I said it. I said what I said. So, you prepare situations, not stories. I have come into some criticism personally because I do prepare stories, but my stories are a series of situations, and my stories, as far as I see it, are this is happening in the world. You can choose to engage in it or you can choose not to, but the world itself is a character and will choose itself whether or not it wants to engage with you. So even if, in a one shot, if you are a coterie of vampires and you are on a train, sure, You may not want to engage with the story, but if that train is going through a scenario or a situation, the situation's going to happen to you, folks, and you're just going to have to kind of make the best of it. You can hop off the train. If you want to hop off the train, that is your choice as a player, as a character. But that train is going to go through that set of circumstances. And it's a very literal railroading analogy. I get it. But when you are developing a one-shot and it needs to be something repeatable at a convention, it is a different set of circumstances than if you are writing a chronicle. Set the players free. Give them the information they need to make decisions and then allow them to own those decisions. They don't need to be in servitude to the story. They don't need to be in servitude to you as the storyteller. They can do what they want to do within the world. That's totally fine. Is the chronicle not ending up the way that you wanted it? Sure, potentially. But that's part and parcel of being a storyteller. Make them pay the cost. So, with every decision, there is an outcome. With every freedom, there's a responsibility. If they choose to not do something, that's got a consequence as well. Reward ingenuity. If they come at something sideways and think of a different way to do something or achieve a goal or solve something or find a solution to something, reward them for that. That's a crowning achievement for a group of players. I mean, first and foremost, if they get to decide anything at the table after 15 minutes of conversation, woo! Because the amount of times 15 minutes has gone by and I'm like, you're still working out a plan, guys. Come on. Let your players fail. The beauty of a game coming together is finding those flaws, playing through those awkward moments, finding the difficulties and challenges, and coming out the other side of them. If your players never fail, they never grow. Reveal your secrets slowly. Don't pull the cover off the mystery at the center of the story and go, ta-da, right at the beginning. There's no point for them to go and uncover and explore and find things out for themselves. Keep the world spinning. So the world doesn't revolve around your players. That idea is starting to shift as we, I think mature into this hobby, but there is still very much a trope of hero play where I am the hero or we are the heroes. We are, at the center of this and we will save the day. Well, the world is a character in every story as well. And there isn't ever just one storyline. People are getting on with their lives around whatever your party is doing. Always remind them of the horror. This is a horror game, and anything that happens in the world of darkness is amplified, right? So, sure, you can have laughs, you can have fun times, but first and foremost, they are monsters and they are beholden to a thing that humans don't want to give up so easy. It is important to remind them that this is horrific, that their existence is not natural, and that death, horror, suffering can be found everywhere. It's one of the reasons why people keep coming back to Vampire the Masquerade and the World of Darkness, is because it gives us an opportunity to explore those subjects safely. And be the keeper of the haven in horror. I like this one. You are here to present a world of horrors to the player characters, not the players. It's everyone's responsibility to respect each other's limits, but as the storyteller, you must be the example to be followed. Pay attention to everyone at the table and make sure any player can turn to you for help in resolving any problems that arise. Don't be afraid to pause the game to address issues, and be sure to check in with your players between sessions to ensure no one is forcing themselves through a game that makes them uncomfortable. The people around the table are more important than the game or story being created. I cannot overstate how important that is. Yes, this is horrible. Yes, this is horrific. Yes, these are the reasons we keep coming back to this. But if anyone at your table is genuinely uncomfortable with what is going on, they're not having fun. Check in with them. Make sure they're okay and adjust what's going on, or talk through the problem if they want to talk. If they don't want to talk, make sure they know it's okay to walk away if they want to. Don't ever make anyone feel dumb. The amount of times I've done lines and veils conversations with people, we've gone through a session 0. We have all the player safety tools in place. We are good to go. We are 4 or 5 sessions into a game and someone goes, "Oh, I didn't realize that was a line. Oh, I'm really not comfortable with that. Hey, can I have a talk to you?" And then they feel really awkward because, they've already said, "I'm okay with this." And then suddenly they find out they're not. I never want a player at my table to not feel like they can come and have that conversation with me. We are growing people. Lives change. Inputs change. We encounter new situations all the time that change what we are okay with and what we're not. You go to therapy, something you weren't okay with, you might work through that and come to understand where it's come from, why it was a problem, and why it's not a problem anymore. So on the flip side of that, of course you're going to find things at some point that you're not okay with, and be okay with not being okay with it. And be okay with having a conversation with your players about that stuff. It's a little conversation. Right. So, storytelling. Yep, we've got some ideas. It's all about dichotomy here, and that spectrum idea. Then we get into using the rules. So we've got advancement over time, advancement of characters, advancement of story, how to determine a difficulty setting. Super important for challenges. This is probably the primary mechanic that you need to come to terms with and be able to decide on the fly. A lot like challenge rating, but unfortunately not a whole lot is set in stone. So you're not going to meet a monster that has a definitive challenge rating. Two seconds, sorry folks. Then we've got difficulty by opposition. So that's when your character is trying to do something that is definitively opposed. Action-specific difficulties, that's a bit more refined, so that's cool. Gives you a much better idea of if you are trying to do this, this would be your difficulty. Discipline versus discipline. So in V5, we see a lot of opposed roll checks, and that is codified. Your Auspex, your resolve plus your Auspex versus someone's wits plus plus awareness to see whether or not they can tell that you are scrying their soul or something like that. How to utilize extra successes, the meaning of failure and how you can modify your tests. Story assets, storyteller rewards. movement and time, objects, so how you can destroy, interact with, dismantle, all that sort of thing. How to interact with the world, determining surprise. I like that. Then we've got storyteller tools. Drama, that new resource. Drama is a resource for storytellers to impact the game in dramatic ways. It's not just something that should be spent frivolously. It is a dramatic point. Drama represents the building of tension in the story, and it functions almost like a budget you can use to make things happen, empower NPCs, and complicate the lives of the player characters. How can you earn drama? You begin with each session with 1 drama per player character. When players choose that option on a choose your pain trigger, and from unique effects, player powers, other types of test failures, or optional rules. So yeah, you can choose whether or not you reveal how much drama you've got available. You know, some groups would really like the tension that's there, as you know, you're hovering your hand over your drama while they're trying to make a decision. You know, some groups won't like that. It's, I think, akin to a DM making a roll behind the screen with a lot of dice. The flurry of panic that goes amongst the players, it's kind of delicious every now and then. So yeah, some pretty codified ideas on how to utilize drama, story triggers, alternate advancement, so what you can do to advance your player characters through their disciplines, their attributes, how diablerie might affect that, special movement options. These are all pretty standard. Cool. And then we take a look at NPCs. So understanding NPC stats, because obviously you won't always create a fully fledged character sheet for an NPC. But it is good to just kind of have some general stats mapped out for them, making tests for them, figuring out what difficulties are, minions being minor NPCs that, you know, kind of follow your PCs around, whether they're standard or elite, how health and willpower work, role-playing them, how to create them. One thing that I would like to see for Demiplane for V5, we have just had Chronicles open up, which are like campaigns, where we can have player characters, but we are still waiting for features for NPCs and encounters to open up. I would like to know when that's going to happen to see whether or not we really invest in that. I can see myself still playing V5 for some time, only because new editions of any game are notorious for coming out with just the core rule books, and if you want to play your expanded options, you really need to wait a year or 3 for them to be available. So I don't see a lot of people hopping on board, you know, negating everything from V5 and hopping on board with V6 the second that it is released, unless they release a really strong all of your options core rulebook. Using disciplines for NPCs, and then we get into the playtest scenario called Not in My Domain. Now, for reasons that will become apparent in the coming days, I am not going to go through that. If you know, you know. Suffice to say, keep an eye on my socials over the next few days. I am going to make this available as a VOD on my YouTube. And if you want to go through it, but maybe have some questions, feel free to drop me a line. You can either do it through my DMs, you can join my Discord. Have I set that up? I don't know. No, I haven't. That's cool. Drop me a line if you want to join my Discord. Building it back up after tearing it down, but I am very open to having conversations about stuff and very open to sharing knowledge. So if you would like to understand how you can get into a playtest group for Vampire the Masquerade V6, I am very happy to try and find a group for you. That being said, I will be looking for opportunities in my exceedingly busy calendar over the next few months in the lead up to PAX in October to have a couple of groups running where we just go through a couple of one-shots maybe, or go through the scenario itself. But I hope you enjoyed that little episode of Vampire the Masquerade news and what's been going on in the V6 playtest. Thank you so much for coming by and taking a look-see with me. I hope you got something out of this, and if you didn't, tell me what you might like to know. I will be back on Monday night with probably a productivity stream. So my game of Bloodlines has been absolutely bugged and I cannot fix it, and I'm a little bit sad, so I'm going to take a little break from Bloodlines before I come back with a new playthrough with a new character. But in the meantime, I've got a lot of Vampire the Masquerade to get on with. So the World of Darkness is a dark and sticky place, and not in a fun, life-affirming kind of a way. Please take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. Remember, everyone around you is fighting battles that you don't know about. So be gentle to yourself. And I will see you on the flip side. Thanks for watching. Bye.